recording and begin in 3, 2.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Eyewitness Conversations here at the Lee Caplin School of Journalism and Media at FIU. This is our 4th Eyewitness Conversation, and we are very excited today because this series now is moving into a collaboration with the Latin American and Caribbean Center here at FIU called the Global Borderless Caribbean. So today we have an amazing guest with us, Bill Frakes, who is a world-renowned photographer and storyteller, in conversation with our own Dr. Carla Kennedy. And today's conversation is going to be about Bill's travels and images that he made in Cuba in the 1980s, and you're in for a real treat today. I'd like to thank LAC for being our partner today, the Caplin School of Journalism and Media, of course, also the Haitian Cultural Arts Alliance, and our 2 speakers. And as always, Carl Jus, my partner in the Eyewitness Institute for Visual Journalism at FIU. So let me go ahead and introduce first our guest, Bill Frakes, who is a photographer, writer, director, who worked for the Miami Herald for the better part of a decade, and also for Sports Illustrated for 35 years as a freelancer, and on the masthead for 25 years. He's freelanced for a wide range of publications and networks. He's a native Nebraskan and now lives in North Florida. He's traveled all around the world to almost 140 countries, and most of his work currently is making documentaries. And he has an incredible work, and he's one of the many brilliant experts, practitioners that we've been able to bring to FIU as part of Eyewitness. So welcome, Bill. Thanks for being here today. Appreciate it. Next, we have Dr. Carla Kennedy, my colleague here at FIU in the Caplin School. She serves as the College of Communication, Architecture, and the Arts, Director of Online Programs, and the Assistant Director in Scholastic Journalism for the school. She's a native Floridian herself and a former high school journalism educator and student media advisor. She believes that students should be given every opportunity to learn and to explore, and we are so delighted to have her here today in conversation with our guests. So thank you. Let's do it.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Friedman, and welcome, Bill. Thank you so much for being part of this collaboration with FIU and Eyewitness. And you're here to talk to us today a little bit about, like Dr. Friedman said, the photographs that you have from Cuba as well as from South Beach, is my understanding, in the 1980s.
I thought it might be interesting to see those. Miami and Havana are pretty much, especially then, really connected. Bette Midler had a song that said, "Only in Miami is Cuba so far away," and that was really true.
Yeah, that was definitely a special time in South Florida in the 80s. What do you remember about it the most?
Well, for me, it was a very interesting experience because I grew up in a very rural place, and I went to undergraduate school at Arizona State, and then I went to University of Mississippi, and I went to University of Kansas and studied journalism, law, and economics.
Wow.
And when I got here, Miami was completely different than anything I'd ever experienced before. It's a very unique environment. Fortunately for me, I grew up in a community that was at least a third of the people were native Spanish speakers. Wow. So when I got to Miami, that was a good thing.
Wow, yeah.
The pace was very different. Miami was cacophonous, to say the least. Everything was constantly in motion. And fortunately for me, one of my closest friends here is Cuban, and his father had been, his father had been on the opposite side of the revolution from
Wow.
the people that won. So early on, I was hearing lots of things about Cuba, and I really wanted to see what it was all about. And South Beach was right, from the Herald building, you could almost see it.
Yeah.
and it was a 1.4 square mile area populated by 400,000 first-generation refugees, Caribbean refugees who had fled Duvalier or Castro, Eastern European refugees who had fled Stalin or Hitler. And they were all thrown into one spot. There was a building moratorium, and it was just it just seemed likely for this conversation to pair them. And for me, it was at the start of my career. I mean, I did these photographs when I was a year or two in.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a long time ago.
So, good lead in. So what inspires you to do what you do?
I think now more than ever, how can you make decisions in the world if you don't have information? And, then newspapers were powerful. And, the Miami Herald had a huge reach in South Florida. Yeah. And I think just due to economic situations, it appears to be diminished that way. But the power of their journalism is still strong. I mean, they have a great staff and they do wonderful work. It's just not seen by as many people as it used to be. So I still have a great faith in journalism. I think it's important. I think it's particularly visual journalism from my point of view. And I think we have to keep it sacrosanct. I think we have to keep the integrity of it. We have to, AI is a prominent thing now, and I think we have to be careful about how that's used. I'm not opposed to AI. I just want to still have veracity and integrity in the work that we do. And so I have a curiosity about pretty much everything, and I love the visual language, so.
Yeah. When you go to your website and you look at the documentaries you made or, the series of photos, they're so diverse, right? It goes from like being in Nebraska to, being at the Olympics, to being in another country. It's just amazing how diverse all of those pieces are. And so I enjoyed that tremendously.
Thank you.
Your work is like simply breathtaking. Like, it's something that, like, when I was talking to you earlier, it really does, when I look at the images, I hold my breath. It's almost like I just want to save that moment, or to sit in that for a minute. Some of these, the shadowing and the darkness and how you've used technology and you play into it. How do you do that?
I think, honestly, I'm a good student and a good imitator. I've had really wonderful instructors. And terrific colleagues. My mom was an educator. She spent 60 years in education. Yeah. A lot of it not unlike some of the things you're doing. And from the time I was incredibly young, she was giving me lessons. I didn't know she was teaching me to be an artist, but she was. My dad was a scholar too, and so he brought books and music into my world. And then I was blessed with, in college, I had some incredibly good classmates. Then I came to the Miami Herald, which was the staff at the Herald. If I should just apologize in advance, because when I start naming, I'm going to miss some. But we had a guy named John Walther, who's the best photographer that most of this generation's never heard about. John was wonderful. He was a Marine. Didn't ever make a mistake that I could see. And then I got to work with Carol Guzzi, C.W. Griffin, Carl, Pat Farrell. The list just goes on and on. Murray Sill. The list goes on and on and on. Just so many. Michael O'Brien. See, I told you I was going to get in trouble if I started listing. Because we had 40 or 45 really talented photographers that were there at the same time, and my lab mate Brian Smith, Pulitzer Prize winner. Just so many, and so we learn from each other. So I'm fascinated with light. I'm always wanting to watch light. Some of the pictures that you'll see in Cuba were I made simply because of the light. And coming to South Florida from Nebraska, Kansas, Mississippi, and Arizona, this is a culture that's unlike that. And at that point in my life, I hadn't traveled a lot. I'd been to probably 10 countries. Now, it's harder to surprise me.
Yeah, with over 140 countries stamped in your passport.
Yeah.
Passport, sorry, yeah.
I've been fortunate, and most of those were done on assignment for somebody. Sports Illustrated gave me a really good chance to see the world. And the Miami Herald contributed to that too. But anyway, the light is just something that's important.
Yeah, it definitely shows through in your work. I mean, that's the first thing that popped out at me is the shadows and the lighting and the angles, and like some of them are just so simple but yet so complex in the same manner. That the picture of the was it the Cadillac? It's like a picture of the Cadillac with the flag, and I was like, wow, you know, and it's very all of your images evoke some type of emotion.
Well,
and I thought that was very, very powerful, coming from a, you know.
No, you're a well-educated observer. I'm not, and thank you for that. You know,
I'm a novice photographer myself, so yeah.
The fascination with Cuba was just that when you were in Miami in 1980, it was hard to hear about anything else, and I hadn't experienced the Cuban culture. You know, it's pretty much not existent in Nebraska. There's a big Hispanic population.
Yeah, but it's a different culture.
It's Mexican primarily, and you know, and then some of the other Latin American countries, but not Cuba. And Cuba was an interesting, scintillating, amazing thing to see. You know, so I needed when the Herald gave me a chance to go, I jumped at it, and I was fortunate because some of these images you're going to see that we're going to show, I wasn't there for the Herald, I was there for Sports Illustrated, because early on Sports Illustrated called me to freelance. And the Herald was nice enough to let me freelance for Sports Illustrated while I was working for the Herald. So I got to see it from both sides, and that also helped me in Cuba with access. The first time I went to Cuba, I went for Sports Illustrated. So the people in the Cuban the system that was monitoring what we were doing got to know me as a sports photographer first. And that was a whole different conversation than if you were there looking at lifestyle or something else.
Politics or anything.
So I had a nice, easy road in, which was nice. And I didn't understand until I'd been there for a while how important that was, but it was.
Wow. Perfect.
But we probably should look at some pictures. So I'm going to get this first one out of the way right away because it's the elephant in the room whenever you talk about Cuba. If we can, there it is.
Yeah, they pulled it up.
There we go. Yeah. That's of course Fidel Castro, who was. And this was the morning the Marines invaded Grenada. And so I was there working on a story. I was at that point I'd been there for quite a while, and this was not my first trip to Cuba, but I'd been there for a while, and I'd been there for, I don't know, not even sure how long. And we're doing a story, and it was the 25th anniversary in 1984 of the Cuban Revolution, and the impact, the economic and geological and geographical influence on the Caribbean basin. And so we were taking a look at that for the Herald, and the Herald ended up publishing 2 special sections that I wasn't working on it by myself. There were Maurice Cohn-Band did a lot of very familiar name in Miami. She did a lot of the work, and the writers that were on it. Guy Gugliotta was the one I worked with most. I don't know. There were a lot of people involved. So I had been out on the street making photographs all day, and it wasn't like you had cell phones or instant internet connections then. So I didn't realize that the Marines had invaded Grenada. I was out taking photographs of some kids playing baseball, and unfortunately for me, I was in an area which was very close to the Soviet embassy. And so I wasn't supposed to be there apparently, because there had been notices broadcast on, foreigners are restricted hotels. Well, how would I know that? I'd been out since 5 in the morning, walking around taking pictures of things of the city waking up. So I had a long day explaining myself why I was on that particular block, and and it wasn't digital, and there weren't Polaroids, so the film was unprocessed. So I said I was taking pictures of these kids playing baseball. Fortunately, somebody from the Ministry of the Interior who knew that I had doing sports and stuff came, and they got me out, and I got back to my hotel, and it was the middle of the night. Knock on my door, and they said, "You need to come with us. You can bring a camera." And they waited while I got dressed, and I took a camera and 6 rolls of film. They put me in the back of a car that had the windows blocked out, and I was like, by then I had been listening to the BBC on a shortwave radio, so I knew that what was going on. And they drove me all around town, and they pulled up at the National Palace, and I thought, great, you're bringing me to see Fidel, and I've got 5 rolls of film. It was a bit of a panic. And he spoke for 3 hours extemporaneously about what was happening. And I was just trying to conserve my film and see what happened. And you can see he was pretty passionate about that at the time. And so I got back and transmitted it before the Miami Herald managed to get it into their early editions. And a lot of other papers around the country and around the world ran the photograph, because I was, at that point, pretty much there by myself with the ability to transmit. One of the UPI photographers got in, and we worked together on things after that, Jonathan Oots, but I just had been there for a while. So anyway, so should we just look at some?
Let's look at some photos.
All right. Well, I think the first one that we're going to take a look at is the Malecón. And
Okay.
this is an interesting waterway that the fort's there, and this is taken from the fort, looking down, and it faces the ocean, and it's a place of it's a romantic spot. Mm-hmm. It's one of the places you always see the vistas that show the couples and people on the seawall, and it's a beautiful place. I haven't seen it in a while, but can you show the next frame, please? It's Havana, just very simply Havana, and the particular refers to the fact that you can rent this car can be rented. They were allowed to pick up foreign guests. At that point, the populace of Cuba, I believe, was only allowed to have pesos. They weren't allowed to have dollars. So I could give him the driver of that particular cab I hired for a couple days, and he drove me around. But they couldn't. Normal people, I couldn't tip somebody with $1. That was forbidden.
Wow.
They couldn't hold dollars, and there were dollar stores that you could get food. It was a very different experience. Anyway, let's just kind of roll along, Carl, as you think.
Okay.
With these.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. This picture was in the barrio in the center of the city, and I was just walking along, and I saw it, and it's interesting. This is a rare photograph, not because the photograph itself is so special, but they had a new kind of film called Polochrome that we used for a very, very quick time. I had 4 rolls of it, and I shot that on it, and the tones of that film actually helped me with this picture a lot. And I spoke to her a little bit. She had 5 kids, and she lived in this building, and it's just in the center of the city.
There's that shadow and light. There it is.
Thanks.
Yep.
Let's just keep moving them along. Yeah. And this is a classic scene in Cuba then. And I think it probably still is. I haven't been in a while, but the crowds in the street and the old cars. I mean, and they were ingenious of how they kept these things running. And I understand that a lot of them still are. I need to get back soon, but I just love the color and the crowd, and it to me kind of summed up how it felt to be in Havana in those days. And this was fun. When I said earlier there were no Polaroids, I meant that I didn't have a Polaroid on the camera.
At that time, right.
But I had an SX70, which was new. And I was walking in downtown Havana, and I had the Polaroid with me, and as well as my film cameras. And I took a Polaroid of this group, and I showed it to them, and they were completely fascinated.
Yeah.
They'd never seen one.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun with that. And in Cuba, at that point in time, without the bicycle, nothing moved, And you almost never saw one person riding a bicycle. It was 2 or 3 or 4 on the bicycle.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's just
Pedaling along.
Just pedaling along, giving her a ride home. This woman's name is TBN. Her father had been was a Cuban military person. Her mother was Vietnamese, and they had met during the Vietnam conflict when Cuba had troops there, advisors of some kind that were on their side. And she's the result. It was wonderful to photograph her and spend time with her. The buses.
The buses.
always, they had the accordion style buses that were so long,
Yeah.
and those are the ones that populated downtown Havana. And this was early in the morning, and he was taking his daughter to school, and this was like one of the first stops, so the bus wasn't packed. I guarantee by the time it finished its 6 or 7 kilometer journey, there was not an inch of spare space in that bus.
Wow.
It was just jam packed. The cars.
There's the cars again.
Yeah, this is from my hotel room. I just was able to look down and see it, and I just waited until one of them pulled out. And there's Ladas there, which is the Eastern European knockoff of a Fiat, apparently.
Oh, okay.
I'm not enough of a car person to answer that exactly, but they mixed with the old American cars, and it was great. And you could put me in Havana, blindfolded and no sense of hearing or anything, just smell, and you would know you were in Havana. There's a complete mix of the tropical breezes, the salt, the diesel, the fully leaded car engines, the cooking food. It's a blend, but you know instantly. And
You just know.
I think everybody that I know that's ever been to Cuba or spent time there can identify that smell, and it's unique to the capital of Cuba. Just as a worker, he's carrying potatoes in, just it was pure muscle power then, not a lot of mechanized stuff, just people working hard, trying to survive. This is Juan Terreno, who was the famous Cuban Olympian. They call him the horse. He won the 400 meters in, I think it was 64, but it could have been 68. And when he rounded the last bend, he broke the bone in the shin bone, and he finished the race and won.
Wow.
Gold medalist. And at this point, he was in the Ministry of Sport, and I think he might have been the Minister of Sport at that point.
Oh, okay.
And he was out jogging around the area where he lived, but he was fierce, great competitor, very tough.
So as you're photographing these people, and they can keep rolling the photos as we go, how are you received by them? I mean, like you talk about the group, you talk about these important folks. I mean, like, you just walk up to them and say, "Can I take your picture?"
Yeah, well, again, I had met him originally when I was there for Sports Illustrated, and you could have a conversation about a lot of things with people there. And if you wanted to talk about a food shortage or something like that, if they initiated the conversation and you just were empathetic about it, that would probably fly. But if you said, "So, do you have any food?" that wasn't going to fly. Or if you complained about the potholes in the street, that wasn't going to fly. But if you said, "I was at Stadio Norte Americana last night, and I'm going to tell you, your left-handed pitching stinks," they'd be like, "You're right, man. Our left-hand, we got to get some." They had the best amateur baseball, probably still do, the best amateur baseball team in the world, and their track and field team is a powerhouse. Their volleyball team at that point, men's and women's, were dominant. So you had a natural language, and they all knew who Sports Illustrated was. The population, extremely literate. In every society, there are good things and bad things. And, I wasn't there to dwell on the bad things. I wasn't dealing a lot with the government. I was just dealing with the people that I was encountering. And most of the time when I was dealing with the government, it was having to do with sports. And they were fair up about the sports coverage, They loved baseball. They did then, and Jose Canseco was the star.
Yeah, Jose Canseco.
And I'm not sure at which visit I was on where I got into it, but I don't know, I must have had 400 people ask me, "What's he like?" Because he was one of theirs, in their eyes, and his brother, and what was the difference, and how were they going to do? And did I know any of the old, any of their stars from past? And of course I did, because I was a fan. Not of their teams particularly, but of baseball in general. It was interesting. One of the things that really stuck in my mind, I was there in 1987 or 88 with the U.S. Olympic baseball team. And we were there for the Pan Am Games, I think. Ron Frazier, the legendary coach from the University of Miami, was the coach of the team. And the Americans so we were in a completely packed stadium, and it's U.S. against Cuba, height of the Cold War, lots of tensions. This is before, some of the changes. It was before the special period really started. And, and so we're full. And the leadoff hitter for Cuba was a guy named Victor Mesa, incredibly fast. He's like Ricky Henderson to us. I mean, he was the leading base stealer they had, and he was hitting left-handed. And the American pitcher was Jim Abbott. And Abbott was born with a birth. He only had on his right arm was short, and so it was that I don't know, but he didn't have a fully completely developed right arm, but his left arm was powerful. I mean, he ended up throwing no hitters in the major leagues. Anyway, Abbott was the starting pitcher for the U.S. And on the second or third pitch to Mesa lays down a bunt down the first base line, which Abbott's got to do. So when Abbott pitched, he would field with the same hand he threw with. So he'd have his gloves, he'd have the mitt under his, right. And so he would throw the ball, and then he would, with his left hand, I look awkward because I'm a right-hander, and he'd put the glove on and then field the ball. Anyway, he chases down the bunt and throws out the fastest man in the Caribbean down first base line, and he got a standing ovation.
Wow.
I was stunned, because it just showed the receptiveness of them to sports. Anyway, that's how I got along with everybody, because I was generally curious. And like I said, a lot of my friends here were Cuban, and I wanted to go have a look.
Right. Do you speak Spanish?
A little bit.
A little bit. Enough. Enough to get you back. Okay.
I do.
All right. Let's look at some more photos.
So this is a grandfather and granddaughter, and that's a picture of himself when he was in the hills in Silla Maestras with Fidel. He was one of the, I'm going to get this one wrong now that you asked me about Spanish, but they would call themselves the barbudos, the bearded ones. And I probably pronounced that wrong, and everybody's laughing at me for my poor pronunciation. I write Spanish better than I speak it.
Oh, wow.
Well, because I grew up learning how to speak Spanish for
Conversational Spanish.
well, and from cowboys that were Mexican American, and a lot of them were second, third, fourth generation, but they speak Spanish very differently than the Cubans do.
Oh, yeah.
Or I spend a lot of time with some of my Puerto Rican friends, and they speak it incredibly different too. So my pronunciation is horrible, but I read pretty well. Anyway, so that was he had been in the Sierra Maestras with Fidel.
Wow.
That was an interesting conversation. And this is a baseball fan. The omnipresent cigars everywhere in Cuba. I've never smoked, but I will confess I tried a couple cigars there just to see what the fuss was about.
And?
Since they're the only ones I've ever smoked, they're the best, absolutely. But yeah, it was interesting.
Okay.
The aroma in the stadiums was, you wouldn't have been able to smoke and do things like that here at the time. Europe, yes, but not here.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
All right.
This is, I took this in Santiago de Cuba, and I was down in that part of the island because they were having, they had an attack on the Moncada, which was the barracks there, and that failed. But that's what started the Cuban Revolution, anyway, essentially. And so they had a 3-day celebration on this 25th anniversary of the event that went on, and Fidel gave a 6 or 7 hour speech. And this was in the middle of the night, and none of this technology was like the technology we have now, where I could just look at the back of the camera and see if I had or not. I was guessing. So it was a big party. I think I probably have to go faster, or we're not going to get through this. I love this telephone. And her grandmother's down the street, kind of keeping an eye on her. And I mean, this is not a cell phone. This is a pretty, you dialed up, and sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't, and you had to have the right coins, and I never did. But that's how you communicated. So this is a bodega, just a small grocery store. They were everywhere. Every block seemed to have one. And, they had ration cards, and they could get food there. And she's just running her shop. This is just a man on the street. I just like the light.
There's that light, that shadow.
Just loved it. Just a lot of these are just, they're simply, this is a collection as opposed to a specific essay. When we published it in the Herald, it was tightly done for this, but Carl asked me to just bring some general pictures of Cuba, so I did. This is the beach. Yeah, when you get outside the city of Havana, there's some beautiful beaches, but there weren't a lot of that there. This was pretty rough. I mean, it was not much sand, but they still flock to the
They
ocean.
still flock to the ocean.
You bet.
Yeah. So as they keep bringing up some, I want to just think about, what do you hope people take from your work?
Information, pleasure, interest. I want somebody to look at it and say, okay, wow. That last picture we just looked at, if you can back up, I should talk about this one. And I'll try to keep it pretty simple. The other direction, if you can, to the 4 women. There we go. This is a unique photograph. I've never shown this before publicly. And the generations. So the woman sitting down, her name was Natika. She was the mother of the woman behind her. And her name is Nate Revolta. Nate Revolta is the mother of Fidel's daughter, who is the woman on the right. And that's his granddaughter on the left.
Wow.
Yeah, and I met them through some photographers in a cultural exchange over there. And Cuba had some marvelous photographers during those days. Alberto Corda, Raul Corrales, Tito Alvarez, just brilliant people. Oswaldo Salas. Anyway, so I got a chance to meet Nadi and that family and talk about things, and those were interesting conversations as well.
Cool family portrait.
Thank you. I really was, when I was talking to her, because she was involved in a lot of the planning stuff, I was thinking, and she'd say, well, Che and I talked here, and I was thinking, boy, a historian should be hearing this, not me. Because all I want to do is make photographs of it, Anyway, so this is just, as you can see, it's a road. One direction's loaded with agricultural produce. The other one, it serves as a bus for a region. This is going out to the tobacco growing area, which is outside of town, outside of Havana. The Malecon, up close and personal. There wasn't a lot of privacy then. There were multi-generational households. Not a lot of extra capital. You couldn't just go find a motel or something like that. Everybody went to, a lot of especially the children went to the younger people went to the Malecon and just sat there, and they arrived together on that bike. I thought this one interested me because they had to piece together 2 pairs of pants to make one pair that was long enough for him. It was just a detail, and his shoes are worn. It wasn't that he was completely impoverished. They just didn't have access to resources. I mean, we were for many years their biggest trading partner, and then when John Kennedy put the ban on, they lost that. And of course, they chose it too. I mean, it was a two-way street. It wasn't that we were picking on them or they were picking on us. It was just a conflict, different of ideologies. There was no cable television, and that Cuban TV ran for about 2 hours a night then. And so they all had these, rigged satellite things. Yeah. And he's just running. He's one of their acts. He's one of their boxers, actually. He's just running on the roof. I looked up, so I saw the combination of the clouds, the light, the runner. That's why it's there.
Beautiful.
Boxers. They had I think they still do. I mean, from Teofilo Stevenson on down, they were just loaded. And these are just some young boxers outside of one of the gyms.
Yeah, hopefuls.
And talented ones, I think. Again, just pure muscle power running the streets, just unloading Tropicola, which would have been Coca-Cola if it was here when that was produced at the old Coca-Cola plant that they co-opted, This was at a celebration. You see a lot of Cuban flags, a lot of patriotism for them. Some people would have said it was enforced by the CDRs, the Committee for the Defense of the Revolution, who monitored the block committees and watched everything. I wouldn't know. I didn't live through it. This was a beautiful mansion at one point, but it had deteriorated. They had a distinct lack of supplies. Again, we were their biggest trading partner when that was cut off. It was hard because the things were coming from Bulgaria and Russia and all that across. 2 young friends. I just thought that was an international symbol of this is friends. They're not brothers. They're just friends.
Yes.
the bike.
Bike.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Cars, the bike.
Yeah, if the bicycle was broken, nothing happened. They had some phrases in there about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is Havana during one of their frequent brownout, blackout situations because they'd run out of power. And the power plant is in the back. You can see it. I just pointed at the screen, which it was run by diesel fuel, so they ran out. The city went dark. As I mentioned before, their amateur baseball team was as good as there was anywhere in the world, and you've seen the influence of
Baseball.
Yeah.
Of their players in our leagues
Yep.
now. Yeah.
I just found this a unique thing, the hand-drawn thing and how they walked, and it was just interesting that was their advertising at the time. Very different than you would have found here for the most part.
That's just a cardboard box, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it is. Cardboard box that somebody's drawn on with a slogan
Put
about
the frame
military.
around it and everything.
Yep. I just thought she was so elegant, just the way she had herself put together, and the color scheme, and she was wonderful.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, the omnipresent cars, they were everywhere. Just a treat to look at them. The chaperone, that was a holdover from the older days, and their society had evolved. Some of it was always in motion. Some of it was like this, where an aunt or a grandmother or somebody went along.
My sister, had to go.
Yeah. To monitor it. And he's one of the special police and again the flags and his wife, and they were pretty strict on how they ran things. So.
The colors are magnificent in this photo.
Thanks. It's a brightly colored island, especially in one of the more rural cities. I think this is in Santiago de Cuba. It could have been in Trinidad though. Out in the countryside, just a farmer and his pregnant wife, starting their family. No running water, but absolutely perfect teeth. They put a lot of money, a lot of the resources they had into medical things. And his young daughter, just the earrings, but
Yeah, the eyes tell it all.
Yeah.
Tell a story.
And here's a grandson, grandfather. A lot of respect. Almost all the families were in multi-generational home situations. And I'm not sure about this, but I have a feeling that this particular picture was, the balseros that came when they floated on rafts and inner tubes to the States. This is before any of that actually started, but I know they'd been out. I'd watched them for a few hours, and this is in Mariel, and they were out playing around in these boats and stuff, and maybe they were just fishing, maybe they were just having fun. But I always had a sense that they were testing things.
Wow.
Yeah. Grandmother, granddaughter. I just like the bonding and the very similar poses. You can see the family connection. I just enjoyed looking at those things. This is from a carnival in central Cuba. It was a pre-Lenten carnival, giant papier-mâché heads. It was a lot like Mardi Gras, but in feel. No doubloons that I noticed, but a pretty healthy party. I think that's universal truth right there.
Yeah.
She was curious what I was doing, and he was curious in her, and the guy behind, I'm pretty sure, was monitoring me because I was a foreigner there with a big camera.
Like, who is that?
Yeah, but I was never confronted, never had a problem, never told not to take a picture of that. The only time was that morning when I was close to the Soviet embassy, and there was a military clash between Cuba and the United States in Grenada. This is just down this is taken from the top of the hill where the University of Havana is, and it's just down to the center part of the street.
Beautiful.
Again, there was a lot of time. There was a very languid society. Nothing was in a hurry. And everybody was watching just what was going on. And she's just sitting on her balcony in center Havana. I wish I had more in-depth stories to tell about these, but these were 40 years ago. Almost exactly.
Well, they are telling a story themselves. I mean, that's why you guys create images, right? To tell stories,
Absolutely.
To create a history, a historical reference for everyone to know. You know, just looking at this and seeing the greenery behind him, you know, that might not necessarily even be there today, and, you know, how they respected the land.
Yeah, and I that was a camera that was, he made that camera and built it, and he would take a picture and then process it and give it to you on the spot, and he had to make a positive, negative, and positive, and go back and forth.
I don't know.
It's all right. Okay.
I guess they're making a camera wherever they are, too.
Yeah, probably. This is the Soviet embassy under construction. Yeah. They probably wouldn't have been happy if they knew I was taking that picture. And honestly, I wasn't trying to sleuth anything. I didn't know until later that that's what the building was. I just saw new construction, and it was, the sun was going down, and there was a lot of smog, and I thought, well, heck, this looks good. So I took a picture from the roof of my hotel, looking over at it. And this was the start of the boat lift.
Boat lift.
Yeah.
I'm from Miami, so.
Okay, well,
I've seen quite a bit, born and raised.
I'm sure you have.
I've seen quite a bit.
And this is one of the many, you know, after the embassy was overrun, and then President Carter and
my mother was one of the very first teachers to teach ESOL.
Oh, really?
Yeah, very first teacher to teach ESOL back in the day when ESOL teachers could only speak English. They weren't allowed to speak Spanish, which was great for her. So that was the original thought, as you know, which made sense about the curriculum. So they actually would have in their classroom, like she'd have a, you know, a sign or something, and this will say chair, and that would say door, and that would say, you know, food, and that would say. So that's how that's the beginning of ESOL. So we were right at the, you know, I heard a lot about the Mariel boat lift because I was going to school then also, you know, as a young kid, and then just kind of watching her go through this whole training program. So when we talk about a lot of the history, I was there. I was there. I remember quite a bit of it and seeing the cities change. So seeing you document, you know, these pictures bring back a lot for myself and probably a lot of other folks that were here during that time.
It was a city in change. When you think about, you know, Miami absorbed about 120,000 refugees in about a 3-month period. Yeah. And a lot of them came under very difficult situations and circumstances. I remember, you know, the Orange Bowl was turned into a massive housing place. There were, you know, 10 cities under the interstates. Yeah. Too bad your mom and my mom didn't have a chance to talk. My mom taught English as a second language.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
To a lot of Spanish speakers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the funny thing about it, she didn't speak a word of Spanish, and to this day she doesn't. Yeah, I'm still fortunate to have her. To this day she doesn't. She thinks I speak more. Yeah, we found out late in life that her grandmother was part Cuban. Yeah, so that's why I have a little bit better of a pronunciation than you, I think. Maybe a little.
Well, my mom first spoke German well, and when she started the program, I don't think she spoke any Spanish either, so she had to do the same kinds of things your mom did. When you were talking about that, I was thinking about how my mom did a lot of the same things. So
you never know, right? You never know who you sit next to and the paths that you actually walked and the things that you actually have in common. You just never know. Yeah. So do we have
South Beach should be ready.
Okay, come on, bring on the South Beach.
Yep. Well, I'm not going to talk a lot about a lot of these photographs, but this one meant a lot to me. The Herald Pep gave us an 8-page special section. A writer named Michael Kranish, who's now one of the lead investigative reporters for the Washington Post, book writer, wonderfully hardworking,
that's an awesome,
talented journalist, and they asked me, Mike Baxter, and here's the Nebraska connection. My first day in the newsroom, Baxter walked up to me and said, "So I hear you're from Nebraska." And I said, "I am." And he said, "Well, you'll do well here." And he said, "Where in Nebraska?" And I said, "The Panhandle." He said, "You're going to do really well here." He was also born and raised in the Panhandle, Nebraska, and he was city editor. So not long into my tenure there, he said, if you could do a story on anything you wanted to, what would you do? And I said, I'd do South Beach. If you can go back to that picture just for a second. This was the picture that was on the cover of it. And her name is Frances Mitnick. And I needed to make this photograph. She was tiny. She was about 4'8", 4'9", and she was, I don't know, at the time, well, I could figure it out. She was 82. And she would she ran a hotel on South Beach, down on south of 5th Street. Anyway, I asked her if I could make her picture, and she said, no, not interested. And so she went into her apartment. I knocked on the door, and she peered out through the chain. And she said, I'm 82. I'll be 82 next week on Wednesday, and you know, I don't want any conflict, any trouble. We've had plenty in my life. And I said, July 18th, huh? And she said, wow, you did that math quickly for a young man. I said, well, it's my birthday too.
Oh, wow.
And she said, I don't believe you. I gave her my driver's license, and she was like, wow. Frances and I, until she died, were close. I would go see her all the time. She was fabulous. And she held the keys to that whole kingdom. So she opened them all the doors for me. Pure luck.
Oh, I'm July 2nd, so Kansas.
Oh, nice.
That's I come with vibing.
There we go. This is South Beach. It's from a helicopter. Just shows what it looked like back then.
Yeah, I remember.
And then this is the whole 1.4 square mile area that was populated mostly by Haitians and Cubans and people from Russia and Germany and Hungary and Poland. But it doesn't look the same now. It's a little bit fancier. But there was
Just a tiny bit.
There was a building moratorium then, so they couldn't do much.
Yeah.
This picture I just got really lucky with. You had a Caribbean refugee and an Eastern European refugee next to each other, and you can see the clashing cultures and the kind of one ignoring the other and the other very interested in it, and the trike and you know. But that was a very South Beach microcosm photograph, and you know, playing ball in a place where it said USA. This was a shock from a young kid from Nebraska. I was just walking down the street, and all of a sudden a boatload of Haitians pulls up, and one comes out and crawls on the sand. And you know, there's not a lot of well, there's no oceans in Nebraska. You're about as landlocked as you can be, and that's what looked to me to be a rickety boat. And I couldn't understand. You know, I have a bit of 4 languages, and I had no idea what they were speaking. I had no idea that it was Haitians. But that was one of the first times I met a really wonderful and fabulous community that I got to know. I know pretty well now.
Great.
You know, and it's great. She found the shark, you know, on the beach. She ended up taking all its teeth and making a necklace. I was there when she took the teeth, and saw her about a month later, and she had a necklace with the shark's teeth. She's lucky it didn't go that way. Just a roller skater on the beach.
On the beach.
Yeah. Never knew what you were going. They were, she was comforted. They were neighbors, and her parents had gotten hurt in a car accident, as I recall, and she was covering it. And I got really lucky here on this because what I love about this picture is not only the dynamic between the woman trying to comfort the child and how frightened the child was, but also their arms make a heart.
The arm, yeah.
Yeah, so get lucky. This is a Canadian couple that really shouldn't have been part of the South Beach story, but ended up being one. They asked me to go make the photo editor said, can you run over and make a headshot of these couple? They've been married for 50 years. They're from Canada. It's their anniversary today. So I went over there, and I saw them, and I said, well, we can do better than a headshot. So I took this picture, and it was on South Beach, and it was in the Times, so it counts. And they had been to a mother and son, and they were moving. They bought some things, and they were moving, and they were on a bicycle built for 2 on the causeway. I managed to get next to him. I got one frame off. There was no autofocus, you know, none of that, just one frame, and it turned out well. And then I had to chase them for 30 minutes to try to find them to get their names.
Great.
And this is what it looked like there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember.
It was, when I saw that, I was just thinking, I really don't want to get old when I saw this. And then I got to know some of these people, like Francis and stuff, and I decided it would be okay if you just had some friends.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
The blood pressure taken, you know. again, knowing an older population, you can appreciate that. That was, I think it was called Kresge's Drugstore or something like that. Yeah. It's been a long time. I don't know what else to say about that. Just that you still find scenes like that, different kind of cars and different kind of attire, but the same. And I think earpods have replaced the boombox.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Hers is small too. They have
Yeah, again, something we didn't have a lot of in Nebraska.
Yeah.
We had one radio station for that. One of the counties I spent a lot of time on growing up with has a population density of one person for every 6 square miles.
One person every. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and in the county I spend the most time in now, Cherry County, has about 3,000 people in it. Most of them are in one town up in the north, and Cherry County is 15% bigger than the state of Connecticut. It's a different experience. This is the Fifth Street gym where Muhammad Ali used to train, and that was one of his handlers.
Yeah.
Just a fun guy. This is a family, mother, son, and husband. They ran a little variety store on 6th and I'm not sure what the street is behind. Oh, that's the next one over from Ocean.
Collins?
Yeah, it might be Collins.
Okay.
And that was at 6th and Collins then. Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of diagonal from the Hotel Nemo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sons and fathers and dogs sitting in an apartment building just on the street. I didn't really know what to do with this when I saw it because she had flies on her face and it didn't seem to bother her. You can see one in her mouth.
Right.
And I decided it was important because she's clearly not unhappy.
Right.
And she was positive and she was athletic and she ran like the wind. But again, being from the Midwest, I had to learn how to see that. And I'm sure there's a lot of things that we would have done. A Midwestern child would have been all over their face, trying to knock that away. And she just was like, it'll go.
Yeah.
In his hotel room, you can see the whole room and what he had to eat and how he had to cook it, and that was it. His name is, I'm going to get it wrong probably, I think it's Betsy Mendelsohn. Again, this has been 43 years since I took that picture.
That's okay.
And I'm working without notes here. But that was his wife, and he was in a concentration camp. And he did well when it was over, but he told me that he would still go out and look in the dumpsters and stuff and salvage food and give it to people that didn't have food because he'd lived through that, through the German, camps, and it was tough. And and he talked for 3 or 4 hours. And Yiddish and German are pretty close. A lot of the words are the same. And he would ship into Yiddish. And since I have pretty good German, I was able to stay with him, and we went back and forth.
Cool.
And he was a great guy. When I met him, I asked if I could see his apartment, and he said, "You're not going to like it." And I said, "Well, I'd like to, if you don't mind."
See it.
And when I opened the door, there were palmetto bugs everywhere. Mike and I both felt really bad about it and didn't know what to do, so we tried to nicely help him get some other resources, which I know you're not supposed to do as a journalist, but sometimes you just can't help it.
Yeah, sometimes you just can't help it.
Yeah. A Hasidic Jew on South Beach. He wouldn't talk to me, but
He let you take his picture.
he let me take his picture and smiled about it. Same with her. I just loved their faces and their attitudes, and they'd just come from synagogue.
Yeah, there's so many stories, behind those eyes. There's so much life.
Yeah. And I wish you could read what Mike wrote, because Michael's the piece he wrote was unbelievably good. And if you read him in the Washington Post or the Boston Globe, you'd know what it was like working with him. I mean, he was just a compendium of knowledge. He knew everything. He would teach me all kinds of stuff. His father was a good writer too. The Nemo Hotel, we got a room in there. I did, because I wanted to be able to be out all night long, stuff like this. $5 a night I paid. It was a very interesting place, and he was lived in the park.
Yeah.
A tourist who I believe was from Germany, and I just thought it was funny that the poster was looking at the policeman and the horse, and he was looking at the policeman and the horse, and the policeman was looking at him. I'd never seen I saw a lot of horses growing up in the ranch country, western Nebraska, but never a police officer looking in a bus window with them before.
With the horse, yeah.
But, yeah, just an interesting thing. There was no conflict or anything. They were just kind of talking. This is, when you think about what South Beach looks like now and all the money that's invested there and how beautiful it is, this is what it looked like then, and it was a very different experience. The nose protector. She was ahead of the game on skin cancer, I think.
Right.
But that was a milk jug that she cut.
Yeah.
Because I asked her about it because she was concerned that I had no skin protection at all, and she was scolding me for it. I had no hat, no sunscreen, anything. Pay attention. This was an image that always, a lot of people like it. It's always been troubling to me. I think that this is a political road I probably shouldn't go down, but I think that we maybe have too much fascination with guns, especially at an early age. That's just my personal take. And I grew up in a county where probably every person had a gun.
Right.
But there aren't the same problems when you have not very many people as there are when you have a lot. So I don't know, but that's an automatic weapon he's holding. It's a fake one. But, anyway. This is their apartment. And they just let me in. There wasn't much there, but we had a long conversation. Grandfather and son, and cigar, and he's appreciating his grandfather's cigar. And that's one of my favorite pictures from this entire take. I just made me miss my grandfather, and and that's the kind of thing that I hope him to do with a lot of these photographs. I just want to share the human experience.
Right.
I want to be the observer that, because I have the license to be there and the opportunity to be there, and so why not share?
The ability and the necessity for you to share, like we can see that in your photos. That's evident. It's like you really want, like I said, it's breathtaking. It just makes me just hold my breath for a minute and try to imagine the moment or be in the moment. I mean, it's just I want to be a shadow, or like I want to be there. So I think that's amazing. Work that you do.
That's incredibly kind of you, and that's one of the things that was great for me when I was at the Herald. Because when you're in a darkroom with CW or with Carol or with Carl or with David or Alberta Koya, any of those folks, you'd be in there and remember it was a different experience. It's unlike the back of the camera, it pops up. Now you have a print. It would pick up Johnny Walther, Johnny Pineda. Right. And you're just looking at these pictures going, wow. It's just like perpetually a kid in a candy store. And I still have that same sort of feeling when I'm online. I spend 2 or 3 hours a day looking at photos. And I probably have at least 1,500 photo books in my house, maybe more. Shopping on Collins Avenue.
Shopping on Collins Avenue.
And if she was 4'5", I'd be surprised. Just pulling her box with her groceries, This is a sequence that's interesting, and I'm going to preface this by saying, I used to drive around all the time with a camera on the front seat. It was an old Nikon. It had a 180, which is a prime telephoto lens, not terribly long, but not bad. And I saw these two, and they were screaming. And I just picked it up, and I shot this next sequence in about 12 seconds total. You can just run through the sequence slowly. You can see it. I thought they were fighting, so I didn't get involved. I just shot photographs of them for a minute. And, they were going at it pretty good. And then on the last frame, she was taking money from her. So as soon as she got in the purse, I called Bill Blass, who was the guy that ran the police radios at the Herald, that monitored the traffic, and he sent the police officer, and they took care of it then. But I wasn't honestly being callous. I thought they were fighting, and at that point, it was the street, 2 people fighting. Why not? But then when I realized it was possibly a robbery, I wanted to do it. And there was always a lot of compassion between the people there. I don't know how it is now, but it was a community then, and people were pretty good about being kind to each other. A lot of people there didn't have much, and he had this dog. He, I think, was also aware of skin cancer from that hat. Right. It's a pretty interesting hat. And I just liked how, the stop sign somehow worked for me there. And they were just neighbors and friends, and they were just having a conversation. Just casual as can be, and slightly different conversation. And I love this, that the man in the dress attire in the middle rode up on that bike. was like, you gotta be kidding me. And they sat and talked for a couple hours, and I just kind of sat in the park watching everything. Came back to it. The beach, always there.
Those lawn chairs are famous.
Yeah,
Yes.
the lunch was great. And they both, they were waiting for a bus from a clinic to pick them up, and you can see they both had some sorts of surgeries, and they were together. And I asked this in this case because of how they were. They had bandages and stuff, so I didn't want them to feel bad. So I actually asked them if I could make their photograph. This is on Collins Avenue, or not on no, it's on Collins, and they had all the things that you can see that they offered to senior citizens. It's a very interesting,
Yeah, they run the senior citizens from South Beach now, boy.
Yeah.
But that was their spot.
Nope, this is about 6th or 7th Street.
Yeah, that was their spot.
And again, the beach chairs, husband and wife, I talked to them, and they had been married for double the amount of time I'd been alive.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see that, to see how they had lasted. And then I found this was interesting too, and this is something that I've found in my career. We just did a film not long ago on centenarians in Nebraska, and I couldn't, I wanted to find some, and so I had some cooperation from the state. So I called their equivalent of the IRS, the state tax bureau, and asked if they could tell me where I could find 100-year-old people, and they said, no, I can't. They can't give out that information. It violated all kinds of trust. And this is a good thing that we have so many in Nebraska. But anyway, so I couldn't figure out what to do. So I called 7 women that I'd gone to high school with. And this is, by that point I was like 55, and I said, hey, where are all the old people? Within an hour, I had 80. And
you had 80 100 years?
Yeah,
oh, wow.
They found 80 for me, and I ended up putting 40 of them about in a film. But only 2 men, all the rest were women.
Of course.
Just saying.
Of course.
No conflict. This is the couple there's another couple that they just a very interesting look, but they look like they're distrustful, but they really weren't. I asked them if I could make their photograph, and
they just were inquisitive.
Yeah, well, the same way I was interested in them, they were interested in me. And I probably looked ridiculous. I was wearing sandals and, stupid shorts, and probably not covered up at all because I had a T-shirt on because I was trying to stay cool. I didn't realize then that the best way to stay cool is to cover up more. But he was always out in front of the Century. This is on between 4th and 5th Street on Ocean Drive. Yeah, he was always there. And this is the last one. This was my friend Frances again. And
from the door.
From the door, and we're going to open and close with her.
Oh, wow.
And she's adorable. And this is one picture I probably should show in color, not black and white. But everything in there is a shade of pink.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was just lovely.
Yeah.
Had that Bostonian, Brahmian accent, very proper. Yeah. And it was funny, and this will be the last comment I have about this. Part of the reason that I do this is because it's, I spend a lot of time I've had a lot of chances to do international things, and I've met just about any athlete, you'd want to meet or be interested in doing. I've had a chance to photograph 8 or 9 presidents and kings and queens and stuff like that. And people are interested in that, but it's people like Frances that are important to me. And I've had a couple of opportunities just recently. About 6 or 7 months ago, I got a letter from a young woman who was probably not a young woman, probably older than me, Frances was her aunt. Wow. And she had doing a search, she had found the pictures from South Beach, and she wanted to know what I knew about her. So I told her what I knew, and told her if she gave me her address, I would send her a print of Frances, and I did. And then she called me back, or wrote back about a month later and said, do you have any pictures of her when she was younger? Because I heard she was really glamorous. And I said, no. I met her when she was 82, but I thought she was pretty glamorous then. I mean, I love going to lunch with her. She's my favorite date on South Beach. We just go for walks and stuff. And that happens more than you can think. No, this will be the last story I tell. I had a similar situation from when I was in college at Kansas. I made a picture of a man, Leroy Hatch and his daughter Mary. And I was driving from Topeka to Lawrence, and they had a cool-looking old truck, like a 1945 truck and stuff. So I stopped, made a picture. I was with them for a minute and a half maximum. Talked to him as I was on deadline and I had to leave. And we ran it small, and we called it Lecompton Luminary. That was the slug, because he was so verbose. And he just was going to keep talking. I mean, I made the picture in a minute and a half. He probably kept me telling the story further. Anyway, this woman called and she said, "Hi, are you a photographer?" And I said, "I am." And she said, "Do you remember a guy named Leroy Hatch?" I said, "I do, from Lecompton." And he was in her nursing home.
Wow.
And she said that he had that picture, which couldn't have been more than this big. It's a 2-column picture on the front page of the paper. He carried around in his wallet, and he'd been carrying it in his wallet, and this would have been for 40 years plus. And he said that it was one of the most amazing things that ever happened to him, that a man from the newspaper stopped, took time to talk to him, and put a picture of him and his daughter in the paper. And that's when I decided 100% this is what I need to do. And that was right at the start of when I was doing all the Nebraska stuff. And Nebraska's home for me, but I hadn't really gotten into it the way I should have.
Yeah.
And so now I spend most of my time doing documentary work there, or stuff like that. But it's important to people, and that's why we have to do it. It's important to the people you're doing, and important you want to share. And at some point, there's going to be a picture of your children or your mother or your grandfather or something that's going to mean something to you. And that's why we do it. It needs to be honest and open and friendly and caring and compassionate and accurate.
That's funny. My last question for you was going to be, what tools do you need to do this that you can't buy in the store, that you can't order offline? And you just went through the laundry list of all those things, kind of just dealing with empathy. And
That's it.
Capturing the human form and human relationships, and capturing that for historical purposes, so that we have something to look at. I took some pictures of my grandfather, who we don't know if he was 100 or not. Some people say he was 98, because of course there was no birth certificate back then. And when I was here in the beginning photography class, and that's some of the pictures. I mean, I had 9. My mother's one of 9, so I had 8 aunts and a uncle, and they all wanted those pictures. And it was just me just learning how to use the black and white camera and black and white film and plan it. But he used to say to me, "Oh, when are you going to send me your money, my money, because I'm your model?" He's like, "Don't I get money?" But that's he's been gone now for about 12 years, and that's the one. If I go to all of my aunt's houses, they have the 8x10 or 11x14 in a frame, on their walls, because that was their father, and it was great. And he was a great person. But anyway, I like I said, as we started this, it's so nice to meet you, and it's been an experience for me to share with you today and talk to you today, and have a walk down history with you today. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be thinking about this as I go home, and thinking I need to be inspired by what you have done to see how that can inspire me to move forward, because it's never too late to create. Right.
Well, and vice versa. I appreciate the time, I appreciate the questions, and I appreciate you being in education.
Thank you. So I don't know which camera I'm supposed to be looking at, but I'll look at this one and say thank you again, everyone who has a chance to watch this video over and over again. And I hope that you appreciate all of the work that Mr. Frakes has done, and we wish him the best in all of the new documentaries or any type of still photography that he's going to do. You can find them. Is it BillFrakes.com?
It is.
BillFrakes.com. You guys give it a look. Have a good rest of your